Hi everyone, this is Rachel from Mini Ministry, coming today to talk about something that gets me every time I read through the Old Testament. I go through the Old Testament even through the time of Christ, and I notice a very similar pattern. It's a pattern of disobedience. Constantly God shows his hand, and then before you know it, the same people who watched the miracles, the same people who saw the sea be parted, do nothing but complain. They forget about God and they go and make themselves idols. They go and worship other things, or they just simply forget. And I sit there sometimes and I think to myself, how can this be? I'm pretty sure if I saw the seas part in front of me and I was led out from slavery, I would remember this moment and I would be adamant to share that with my children and my grandchildren and to let this legacy continue. But that's not what happened to the people in the Bible. And then I stopped, and it's like God whispered to me and said, but the same is true with you, my child. Because all too often, we sit and point fingers at others when we really should be pointing the finger at ourselves. We are highly disobedient people. Now, you might be sitting there and thinking to yourself, I'm not a very disobedient person. But let's think about this. Do you speed when you drive down the road? Because that's disobeying the law. Have you ever told a lie? And I mean just a simple lie. Not a big obvious lie, but maybe a small one. That's disobedience to God. We have our children often who we tell them not to do something, and then they go and do the exact same thing you told them not to. And that's disobedience. Disobedience comes in so many different forms. I think we forget that we too, much like our children, are disobedient to the Father. There are many times when we've seen the miraculous things God has done in our lives. We have felt them and we have seen the Spirit move, and yet we forget and go on about our lives, and somewhere along the way we disobey because we too have forgotten. We need to be people who obey. Obeying of our leaders and our government, obeying the laws of what's laid out, obeying our teachers and our parental figures, and above all, we need to be obeying the Lord. It sounds like a very simple thing when you say it like that. We just need to obey. It just makes sense. Like you sit there thinking that just makes perfect sense. But the truth of the fact is, if we're honest with ourselves, that's the last thing we want to do. Because if we obey another, that means that we're not obeying the desires of ourselves, which is really what God wants. But that's exactly what we need to do. We too often are sitting there so focused on ourselves that we forget about God completely because we are so focused on what we want to have happen. What do we want the outcome to be? What are we going to get from it? And we forget about God entirely. Disobedience comes in so many different forms. God tells us to read and study His Word. Are we doing that? To spend ample time, go away and shut the door and spend time in prayer. Are we doing that? To raise our children in the knowledge of the Lord. Are we doing that? To be people of Christ, showing Christ in everything we say, do, think, and speak. Are we doing that? To obey our government. Are we doing that? Too often we think disobedience is just for children, but my friends, we are all disobedient. We all fall short of God's glory. And sometimes we need to step back. And we need to think, how can I obey the Lord today? Obedience is hard. I know what I'm supposed to do. God has told me exactly how I'm supposed to live my life and what I'm supposed to do. But sometimes I just don't want to be honest. Sometimes I don't want to go the extra mile. Sometimes I just don't want to. But you know what happens in that sense? It's all about me. I don't want to. I want to do something else. This is not how I want to spend my time. The focus of self gets us in so much trouble, my friends. And that's exactly the same thing that happens in the people of old. They get focused on themselves. They forgot God completely. It's time we take that back. Let's not be people of self. Let's be people, holy people, devoted to God. Let's obey Him in every way that we can. And while we can't be perfect like Christ, and we're going to fall short, we can definitely make strides every day to be a little bit closer as we walk with Him. So think of how you are disobedient. Think of how you fall short. Think of ways you can obey. And think of the joy that brings God when you do. I hope you all have a great and blessed day. Until next time.